And welcome back. An incredible story on Wall Street as a retailer that is shedding hundreds and hundreds of stores across this country became a market darling after Reddit users fueled a trading frenzy. The financial world in a frenzy.
Let's get to GameStop.
GameStop. This GameStop is really something we must talk about.
Shares of struggling video game retailer GameStop, which had closed more than 800 locations in just the last 2 years, defying gravity. The stock falling around 30% today, but it doubled yesterday and it's up more than 1,200% this year. Up 1,700% this year, GameStop more than doubling yet again yesterday. That's thanks to a growing group of young, mostly male, amateur day traders taking on some of Wall Street's most powerful hedge funds in an epic David versus Goliath showdown. President Biden's team even asked about this on Wednesday.
Our team is, of course, our economic team, including Secretary Yellen and others, are monitoring the situation.
The young speculators inspired by a community on Reddit called Wall Street Bets, followed by over 4 million readers. Post to Wall Street Bets recently exposed a serious, exploitable vulnerability in GameStop stock. A number of influential Wall Street investors were heavily shorting it, which meant that they were betting the stock would crash.
You borrow shares of the stock and you sell it. And if the price goes down, then you can buy it back at that lower price and pocket that difference. But if you're wrong and the shares go up, then you're going to have to buy back the stock at that higher price. And that difference is a loss for you. That's painful.
As it turns out, the Wall Street titans were wrong, very wrong. 19-year-old JP Hurtado and others, they started buying, sending GameStop soaring.
When people see something going up, they're going to have a fear of missing out. And because more and more people keep hopping in, the price keeps going up.
JP, a student at the University of Illinois at Chicago who never traded a single stock until a year ago. He bought about $8,000 of GameStop using the app Robinhood and says that the close of Wednesday was worth $82,000. With amateurs like him profiting, hedge fund titans have lost an estimated $5 billion.
This is uncharted territory, and it's a very interesting question as to what happens next. Certainly, there's no mechanism to make it stop immediately.
And for more, let's bring in a markets pro to discuss. David Waddell, CEO and Chief Investment Strategist of Waddell and Associates. Well, this is the craziest story. A couple of days ago, I got a 14-year-old boy who's telling me, "Hey, Dad, we got to buy some GameStop stock." And I said, "What are you talking about? Since when do you care about the stock market?" And it reminded me of that story going back a few generations ago when Joe Kennedy was getting his shoe shine, and a shoe shine kid was telling him which stocks to buy, and he said, "Now I know when it's time to get out of the market. We've reached crazy town in effect." Is there a sense that, and we'll get into the dynamics of the market stock and Reddit and the rest, but that this just doesn't make a lot of sense where we are with the market with all the horrible economic indicators north of 30,000, and now I got kids on Reddit driving shares and giving hedge fund guys agita?
Well, thanks for having me on, by the way. And I was in the dentist's office with my daughter, who's 14, and looking at her phone, and on her trading app, she had GameStop on there too. And so I had the same experience. This isn't about the market overall. This is about a 2% slice of the market. You know, if you take the top 300 shorted companies, it's about 2% of the whole deal. And maybe there was 25 billion lost by short sellers potentially in the GameStop deal, but it's a $50 trillion marketplace. So I view this as, something interesting and a sign of the times, given how tech fueled sort of everything is. But I don't think it's really a warning signal that investors with longer time horizons need to sell. I just think it's sort of a curiosity within the market right now.
Well, David, there's always been a resentment. I think some of it justified, some of it maybe oversimplificated, but especially with speed trading and everything else and the consolidation of especially some intelligence here, that the hedge fund guys and whatever else, they're at such an advantage over the rest of the investor class that this whole idea of eat the rich kind of thing had a lot of people cheering on what these kids did on Reddit. And that they say, hey, you know what? If they found a way, for some, trapdoor here, the hedge fund guys got it coming. What do you say to that? That people saying, there's a little bit of a French Revolution going on here, and, what's good for them is good for us.
I mean, I think there's truth to that. I'm cheering them on too a little bit. You know, the chat room that these people congregated in has 3 million users. Okay. And let's just say that they've got a balance of $10,000 a piece. You total that up, it's a $30 billion virtual crowdsourced hedge fund. That puts it in the top 10 of all global hedge funds by asset size. Now, the average investor cannot get in a hedge fund because you typically have to have a whole lot of income, or you got to have a lot of assets under management to qualify, if you can get an appointment to get into the top ranked funds anyway. So I do think this is a bit of a democratization event, but hedge funds have been slugging it out with each other for years. I mean, there was the famous one between Carl Icahn and David Einhorn not too long ago over Herbalife. I mean, they were slugging it out on TV. The only difference here is that the retail investors have put on the boxing gloves and taken out a couple of hedge funds in the meantime. So I do kind of like a David and Goliath story as a David. And so, you know, they're just creating a virtual hedge fund. There's nothing illegal with what they're doing. And, you know, it'll probably drive more attention to that chat room. And over time, that thing will end up being polluted, and maybe it'll be, you know, watered down in its effectiveness for the people listening to the scuttlebutt within the chat room. But for now, it's a bit like a hedge fund. And so this is a hedge fund fighting a hedge fund. The difference is this is one that's open to everyone, where the other ones are closed to all but the richest and the most connected institutions.
And let's talk generically about the two combatants, if you will, because already we see the stock down today, in part because a bunch of apps where the kids were going to were shut down because of this. Conversely, if the hedge funds just shut up and just don't broadcast what they're going to short and keep it, you know, more directly with some of the bigger institutional investors that they have here, this won't become public information, and the kids can't go on Reddit to try and, take their piece of revenge, if you will. In the end, we don't have a level playing field, and the ones that are going to get hurt the most, don't you think, David, are going to be these folks here, these amateurs who invested. They're looking at it as a game. You know, what goes up does come down.
Yeah, it's musical chairs. There are a lot of paper millionaires right now. You don't want to be the last one out. So in the dentist's office 100 points ago, I told my daughter to sell GameStop, right? And she had a healthy gain in it. It was fictitious, but healthy. So you don't want to be the last guy in there. And what's interesting about this specific situation is that the way that they affected the short squeeze, what they all committed to each other that they wouldn't sell. And so there were no shares on offer. There was a lot of buying demand from short sellers trying to cover their position. And if you have a lot of supply, or you have no supply and a lot of demand, the prices go higher. Today, I think we topped out at like 480 or something, and then it instantly rocketed down to 150. I think that was before they shut down those sites and put the margin limits on. So there was already a little bit of that rush to the exits. You know, if you have a stock that goes up 700% in a month or so, you probably just take your winnings and go. But I will say, and there'll be, you know, a lot of commentary about whether this was good for the individual investor or not.
Finally, David, do you think we're going to look back a year from now and say, oh, remember in late January that story with GameStop? That was a one-off, funny story. Or did something get figured out here potentially? Because every angle in the market, and you know this better than me, if somebody finds something, they're going to try and find a way going forward to monetize it, not just GameStop. Did this open a trap door here that more and more are going to try and go through?
I think it's a bigger story than that. I think an institution has been created, and that's the flash mob. And it'll show up and change political culture. It'll change financial culture. I mean, when it arrives, and it arrives in force, it can move markets, it can move polls, it can do a lot of different things. So I don't think the flash mob is going away. It just happened to settle on GameStop in its most recent appearance. So this is an institution now within our country, or if within the global economy, and people are going to have to take account for it. You know, you're not going to be able to run up your short interest to 140% of a stock's float and not awake, somebody in a chat room that can create a flash mob within 30 minutes. And both of our children who are 14 are participating. We didn't even know it was happening, right? So the speed and the size by which people who are connected technologically can congregate, move, and impact corners of society, including the financial markets, is something we all have to take account of.
It's a whole different kind of speed trading, I guess. David, great job. Thank you for breaking it down for us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, the senator who's delivered the same climate change speech here hundreds of times over the past decade, he just read it on the Senate floor for the very last time. After the break, we'll explain why.